Well, hi everyone. We're so glad you are here with us. Today, Mama Judy and I are going to be talking about something that we spoke about back in episode 3 of our podcast about inspiration. But at that time, we talked about finding inspiration through external factors or external things in your life. Today, we're going to focus in on inspiration that can be found within. And so, hi, Mama Judy.
Hi, Jill. Hi, everyone. Good to see everybody.
Yes.
Well,
And Mama Judy came up with this idea because we both said to each other, everyone, it seems like whether it's online or friends we're talking to regarding the creative process, people go through little dips and lulls of not finding inspiration for their creative adventures. And so it's something that is kind of evergreen that always needs to be discussed. But I love the idea of speaking about more the internal things today.
yes, and I love the word evergreen. Um, and you're right, Jill. I see this word, this phrase, how do I get inspired? I'm not feeling inspired this week. So, as you pointed out, it belongs to everybody.
Yes.
And I got to thinking, and we mentioned this a little bit in episode 3, but I got to thinking about how I get inspired. But I focused on not going out, say, for example, to Pinterest to get ideas, which is very easy to do. But the other thing that I do when I need to be inspired, I go in and just sit in amongst my supplies. And it's amazing when you're going through your supplies and you're looking at things, all of a sudden, if you just are relaxed in that state with no expectations, how often an idea will come to you. And last week, when Lynn was over here for a play date, I asked her how she gets inspired if she doesn't go out to look at somebody else's. And Lynn's work, many of you will know, like Jill's, is in fabric. And it was the same thing that I said that I do. She said she goes in and just handles her fabrics
Mm.
and just sort of sits with them, if you would.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I think we can all do when we're feeling uninspired, just go sit and touch, smell, see your supplies you work with.
Yes, I love that. And even if you work with the mixed media type thing. So whether it's paints or even just going in and sitting down with your canvases, if you were a painter and your paintbrushes and your paints and seeing the colors and just kind of seeing what comes to you, what's inspired just from that, what's right around you.
And I think the key on all of this particular way to get self-inspired is to be there in a relaxed, open-minded, almost a meditative state.
Mm.
So that you're just breathing, you're just there, you're not putting pressure on yourself. You're just sitting with this, and that kind of incubates, it's kind of an incubation or an incubator for ideas. It's
Mhm.
amazing how things will pop up that in your conscious mind you might not have ever thought about them.
Right. Well, last week I bought a bunch of these plastic bins, Mama Judy, to put different
Uh-huh.
fabrics in. And so I think I got 6 of them. And I just wanted to sort stuff by color or something because it was just becoming an overwhelming pile of fabric. And then I was just like scared to even go dig in. But anyway, so I got these 6 bins and I put everything in there organized. And then the final touch, which I did last week, was my friend has a label maker, put labels on it. Now, when I come and sit in my space, I can kind of look over there and I see a bin full of kind of like reds and browns or whatever. And even just having it somewhat organized for me anyway, where I can actually see my supplies instead of having a big pile, that has inspired me a lot. And it just makes the possibilities kind of open up because it feels more doable and not so overwhelming.
That's an excellent point, and everybody has a different approach to that. There's no organization to my, well, I guess you'd call it organization, but I have just piles and piles of stuff that I just pick up and go through, and there is no sorting. So
Yeah.
depending on how you prefer to work, It does the same thing. It opens up possibilities. And that's what inspiration is. It's the possibilities. And I want to segue into another way to keep track of those possibilities if you want to, if that's a preferred way. When we're inspired, sometimes we get so many ideas, we almost get overwhelmed again. You have all these ideas running around in your head. And so if you're at that point, then maybe keep a list of those ideas. Again, this is coming from your self-inspiration when you're in that inspiration mode. If you're a painter, you can write it down and sketch it out. Just something that records your inspiration, your idea, maybe 3 words, a small description, and then you throw it into a file.
Yes.
Now, when you're feeling uninspired, you have a resource that came from internal to go to. And the only reason that you put it down is because as time goes by, we all forget about those great ideas.
Yes.
But now let's say I've done that for the last 2 weeks. And I walk in and I'm uninspired that day. Well, I need something that came from internal to get me going. Because even if you look externally at somebody's work, I mean, your idea comes from the internal. So now all my internal thoughts are in an external file. I can go to it. I can read through it. Maybe one of those will spark me where I'll go, oh God, that's great. I want to do that idea today. So we're keeping a catalog of our internal inspiration.
That is a great idea. This just made me think about just keeping that list. Now this is when you're out and about, but a lot of times things come to me when I'm on my walk. So internally, I'm just thinking about things, and things will come to me. So I started carrying, instead of getting on my phone, I may have even mentioned this in the past, but I started carrying a little pad of paper with a pencil so I could just jot it down. And it's just a word or two, but inspiration comes a lot for me when I'm walking without any noise or anything, just walking. And so some way to record that, a piece of paper on your phone, whatever.
Absolutely. That's perfect. We're lucky in this technological age that we have various ways we can record our inspiration, but you're just then doing enough to capture the idea so that you don't lose it. Because on your walk, you might have 10 of them. You get home and you go, it's like your dreams when you wake up. You're sure you will remember your dreams. 5 minutes after you woke up, you've forgotten them. So let's have an organized way to capture our inspiration so that then we can call on it whenever we need to.
And remember to go back to it.
And remember to go back. Maybe what we do, we put it in the file, then we put a note in front of us. Check inspiration file.
Yes.
And for me, Jill, I tried doing things on my phone in a file, but I always forget. I guess I'm a little more old school. I always forget to go check that file. So now I start with a physical file down that I can pull up and just spread out with these ideas.
Yes, I love that idea. Okay, so what else? What's another one are you thinking?
We've talked about just sitting with your supplies. Oh, another one.
Okay.
One of the things that I do quite often, we all have projects we start. And actually, this is one I see a lot when somebody is painting particularly, but it could be with any medium. So you're going along, you think you're inspired, you look at it, you go, oh God, I hate this. This is horrible. I usually just throw them in a pile in the corner and they just sit there. But what I've also found as a way for internal inspiration is I go pull out, in fact, I did yesterday pull out just a piece of paper that I had started to work on for journal pages, and I didn't like it. It was like fingernails on the blackboard. I pulled it out today, and voila, there are the well, if I did this, well, what if I put this mark here? So if you
Wow.
run against those things that you don't like what you've produced, it might have a place to inspire you in the future. So
Yes.
just put those in. I can see now, I keep telling people to put little piles and files. Pretty soon somebody's going to have an office full of piles and files. But again, just don't get rid of it. Just maybe put it in the, what shall we call it? Maybe later file,
Ooh, I
whatever,
like that.
or idea, maybe later. Because
And
again, oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, and when you have those little piles, at one point when I was sort of just doing mostly fabric and stitching, now I'm trying a little watercoloring and more collaging and stuff. I had this little pile and I'm like, I'm probably not going to use it, but I just stuck some stuff over there. I wouldn't have used it if I kept with my stitching, but now that I'm doing other things, I am pulling from that all the time. And it is so inspiring. I'm like, oh my gosh, this was a little scrap of paper that had scribbles on it. But I thought, well, if Mama Judy had this, she'd probably incorporate it into a journal. So I throw it in this little area thinking I'm going to be like Mama Judy. And then when I get inspired one day to do collage journal or something, I am using that stuff and it's totally inspiring me. And I would have never
That's
guessed it.
another perfect example. I think the reason, Jill, I wanted to touch base on inspiration again is to make sure that everybody not understands, but was aware that inspiration really doesn't have to be from somebody else's work.
Yes.
That we can be our own source of information. I think I mentioned, yeah, and I think I mentioned on one of the podcasts the time that I was out on Pinterest. Same thing, trying to get external inspiration. And I'm looking at these journal pages going, oh my God, I love this. And then I realized it was my journal. And I mean, so right there, two things. Number one, get a clue when you're looking at something. But number two is I was my own source of inspiration that day. But at that day, it had not occurred to me to go back again. Part of it is I don't keep my journals, so I don't have them physically to go through for inspiration. But I can go to my postings and look at them and get inspiration from my previous inspiration. That's what I'm doing. My previous inspiration will spark my current inspiration.
Yes. Okay. Did everybody just heard that bird squawking in the background? Mama Judy Mama Judy is recording the podcast outside on her patio where she does a lot of her art and have coffee and all that. And that bird is just squawking away.
That's one of those big black ravens that we have around here. You might also hear a golfer go by.
Yeah, I heard some kids a minute ago. The other thing, speaking of even that bird squawking, as you're sitting with your things and you were saying earlier to like look with your sight and feel your fabrics, but you do spend time outside where you are creating your art. And that could be a type of inspiration while it is external, but while you're trying to collect inspiration, you might be like, ooh, I'm going to paint a raven if you're in that mode of thinking about being creative.
Absolutely. That's a good point. I have one more point that's a little more psychological, Jill, before we leave our audience. And we've talked about this too in various ways, but it's about don't should yourself. For example, let's say that you've got time, and especially people that don't have as much time, for example, as I do now that I'm retired. And you go to your art room and you think, I should get something done. But you don't feel inspired. You just can't quite, but you keep saying, but I should.
Mm-hmm.
By doing that to ourselves, that first of all kills our inspiration. I think inspiration comes through the most when we have a quiet voice in our head. And
Mm.
telling yourself, I should, is not the voice that's quiet. But the most important thing, I believe, when we use the word should, is we take something that is fun and we move it into the obligation column.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do that, when you go from I'm creating for fun because I love it to I should, I have to do something, you've just really kind of stifled yourself. Now, there are times when an artist really truly does need to get a certain amount done, for if they have a deadline or something. But unless that comes up, you don't have to do anything at any one time most of the time. So
Yeah.
don't put yourself into that. Allow yourself that internal environment that will free up that creative muse that is sitting in there, just waiting for you to be quiet enough that they can be heard.
Yes, and when you said the term obligation, it's like you're making it into a chore for yourself.
Yep.
And that's not what it is. And then it made me think too, internally, to think about, turn that around when you're saying I should. You could ask your inner child. We've talked about that inner child
Yes.
in us that wants to come out and play. Ask them, what would you like to do? And let your insides come up with that. Like, let's just turn this around. What would you love to do for fun or to express yourself today?
Yes. And that internal voice is self inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're good with our internal voice, we will create the environment that allows the inspiration to come out. And
Yes.
talking to that inner child, or just sitting there and just, like you said, use the word, I get to create for the next hour.
Yes, change that
Even
from
if you
you have
already
to.
know, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you know what you want to do by saying it in that way, we've created that internal environment that now we look forward to it instead of dreading it.
Yes, and we use this word possibilities, exploring the possibilities before. Instead, it's this thing where you just want to shut it down. Instead, it's like, oh, I get to do this. What? There's so many opportunities in it for things for me to explore. One last thing I think I'll say, and we've talked about this some, even in our using art as healing and that kind of thing. But another internal thing is if you're journaling, you're feeling, sometimes when I'm journaling,
Mhm.
all of a sudden I'll just feel like, oh, I want to paint a flower now, or paint something, or draw something of what you've just taken from your inside as you're journaling it out, and then using that as inspiration and just seeing what comes. And you might be stitching or drawing or collaging or whatever might come to you.
Yes, absolutely. I love that.
Well, good. Well, and we hope for our listeners that you will take something that was mentioned today. If you're feeling that little dip in inspiration, don't let that hold you back. Definitely don't think you should be creating, though, but just
Yes.
understanding, remember how lucky we are to get to do this. And we hope one of these ideas has sparked something for you. And when we post this, especially in YouTube, you can leave a comment. I would love for people, if you have other ideas, internal inspirational ideas that could be helpful, to drop it into the comments, because then other people might be able to see if it's something different that you've done, and incorporate that into their own life as well.
Absolutely. I love those because that's where I learn a lot, is from people's comments to something. So good idea. We
Yeah.
also want to remind that periodically we're going to do little videos on YouTube on tips from you and I, to keep their eyes, ears open for that also.
Yes. And Mama Judy, we have one up now. And by the time this episode airs, there'll probably be another one. And it was, a lot of people loved this video that you did. It's a how-to, but you have to go look on our YouTube channel to see what it is. But she did a great how-to. And I'm going to be doing a video soon coming up that has to do with something around traveling. Well, Mama Judy, this was so fun. And this is our first time where we're now doing our monthly podcast. So Mama Judy and I, before we got on, we were saying how much we miss each other just on a weekly basis. We still are in constant communication with each other, but this is fun to see your face And we're so grateful for all of you tuning in with us. And we hope you found something helpful today.
Absolutely. We love our audience.
All right. Love you, Mama Judy.
Love you too, my dear. Talk to you
Talk to you
later.
Bye.